Mark and Laila had been married for 10 years, a decade that had seen their relationship slowly erode under the weight of unmet expectations and emotional distance. Mark, a successful architect, spent his days buried in blueprints and late-night meetings, seeking solace in work as an escape from the cold reality of their marriage. Laila, on the other hand, had turned to her faith, spending her Sundays at church and volunteering for community programs to fill the void in her heart. One Sunday morning, while preparing breakfast in their modest suburban home, Laila broached the subject of their fraying bond. "Mark, would you come to church with me today?" she asked hesitantly, her voice tinged with hope. Mark barely looked up from his phone, his brow furrowed as he scrolled through emails. "Church?" he repeated, skeptical. It had been years since he last set foot in one. "Please," she pressed. "Just this once. It might help." Reluctantly, Mark agreed, more out of a desire to placate Laila than any genuine interest. He didn't realize then how profoundly that decision would alter their lives. The church was modest but warm, filled with the hum of quiet conversations and the soft rustle of hymnals. As the service began, Mark tried to focus but found his mind wandering. He scanned the room, his gaze settling on a young nun seated near the altar. There was something striking about her, not in a way that demanded attention, but in the serenity she exuded. Her face, framed by the simple habit she wore, carried a quiet strength. When their eyes met briefly, Mark felt a strange pull, a connection that left him unsettled. After the service, Laila eagerly introduced Mark to members of the congregation. Among them was the young nun. "Mark, this is Sister Hana," Laila said, her tone warm. Hana extended her hand, her smile polite but curious. "It's nice to meet you," she said softly. For a fleeting moment, her gaze lingered on his, and Mark felt an inexplicable warmth. That night, as Mark lay in bed, the image of Hana stayed with him. He couldn't understand why her presence had affected him so deeply, but he couldn't shake the feeling. The following week, Laila mentioned that the church needed volunteers for repair work. "Sister Hana is organizing it," she added casually. Without thinking, Mark volunteered. The next day, he arrived at the church and found Hana waiting by the entrance, holding a toolbox. Her demeanor was calm but welcoming. "I wasn't expecting you," she admitted, her smile slightly surprised. Mark shrugged, trying to appear nonchalant. "I thought I could help. I'm an architect after all." As they worked side by side, repairing broken pews and repainting walls, their conversations flowed effortlessly. Mark spoke of his career and his passion for restoring old buildings, while Hana shared glimpses of her life before the convent, her love for painting and literature. Mark was struck by her wit and humor, qualities he hadn't expected. Hana, too, found herself drawn to his vulnerability, sensing the loneliness he carried despite his outward confidence. Days turned into weeks, and their shared work drew them closer. What began as formal conversations evolved into playful banter and genuine laughter. Mark began to notice the little things about Hana, the way she wiped paint off her hands absent-mindedly, the light in her eyes when she spoke passionately about her community. For Hana, Mark was a window to a world she had chosen to leave behind. His kindness and vulnerability stirred feelings she hadn't expected, feelings she prayed to suppress. Yet the line between friendship and something deeper blurred with every passing day. One rainy afternoon, as they worked together to fix a creaky door, Hana invited Mark to join her for tea. They sat in the quiet kitchen of the church rectory, the rain tapping softly against the windows. Their conversation, initially light, took a serious turn. Mark spoke of his failing marriage, the emotional void that had grown between him and Laila. "I don't even know if she sees me anymore," he admitted, his voice heavy with pain. Hana, moved by his vulnerability, opened up in return. "I thought I was certain when I took my vows," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "But there are days I wonder if I made the right choice." Their shared confessions forged a bond neither could deny. When Mark's hand brushed hers, the touch lingered, charged with a quiet intensity. Though neither spoke of it, they both felt the shift in their relationship. Their interactions grew more intimate, filled with stolen glances and subtle compliments. Both knew they were treading on dangerous ground, yet neither could pull away. Late one evening, after organizing church supplies, they found themselves alone in the dimly lit storage room. As their hands brushed while reaching for a box, they froze, their proximity too close to ignore. "Hana," Mark whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "We can't," she murmured, but her words trembled with uncertainty. Their eyes met, and the longing they had suppressed became undeniable. For one fleeting, forbidden moment, their lips met in a tender, hesitant kiss. The kiss unraveled them both. Hana was consumed by guilt, her faith and vows clashing with the emotions she couldn't deny. Mark, too, felt the weight of his betrayal but rationalized his actions, convincing himself that his marriage had already failed. Despite their guilt, they couldn't stay away from each other. Their clandestine meetings continued, their connection deepening even as it tore them apart. Laila began noticing the changes in Mark, his growing distance, his distracted demeanor. One evening, she followed him to the church and saw him with Hana. The confrontation that night was explosive. "It's her, isn't it?" Laila demanded, her voice laced with hurt. Mark's silence was all the confirmation she needed. Hana was summoned by her superiors and given an ultimatum: seek redemption through penance or leave the convent. Torn between her vows and her feelings for Mark, she chose to leave, unable to reconcile her faith with the path her heart had taken. Mark's life also fell apart. Laila filed for separation, and his reputation in the community was tarnished. Despite everything, his love for Hana remained, though it had left destruction in its wake. Months later, they met one last time in a quiet park. The air was heavy with unsaid words as they sat together. "I've lost everything," Hana whispered. Mark reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "We have to let each other go," she said, her voice trembling. Years later, their paths crossed briefly in a crowded street. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the memories surged back. But they walked past each other, carrying the scars of their love, a love that had forever changed them. Subscribe to our channel and turn on the bell notification for more stories like this, and give this video a thumbs up. Click on this next interesting story.